Ever wish there was like a cheat code to a longer, healthier, and honestly more enjoyable life? Well, get ready to unlock some ancient wisdom with the Tao of Health, Sex, and Longevity. This book is seriously like a treasure map, leading us to a life full of like vitality and balance and, maybe even squeezing in a few extra years.
Yeah.
Now, I'll admit, when I first picked up this book, I was kind of like, sex and longevity, are they serious?
Uh,
It almost sounded a little too good to be true, right? But trust me, this isn't some like mystical mumbo jumbo. It's packed with advice on how to align yourself with the natural flow of life, and that's the Tao, to achieve, optimal health and well-being. So what exactly is this Tao thing? You could think of it like the Force in Star Wars, this like universal energy that flows through everything. And the key to it all, according to Taoism, is to tap into this force to ride its waves instead of, fighting against the current. When we resist, that's when we create friction, stress, and ultimately disharmony. But when we flow with the Tao, we experience a sense of ease, balance, and that vitality we all crave. Imagine like a river, right? If you try to swim upstream, you're going to tire yourself out really quickly. But if you just go with the flow, you glide effortlessly, conserving energy and, actually enjoying the ride. And that's kind of how it is with the Tao. Now, this book goes into all sorts of fascinating stuff like diet, exercise, and yeah, even sex. But it all comes back to this central idea of balancing your inner energies. It's like finding that sweet spot where everything just clicks and works in harmony. And speaking of harmony, one of the core concepts in Taoism is this interplay of yin and yang. We've all heard these terms tossed around, but what do they actually mean? Yin is like this cool, receptive, feminine energy, while yang is the warm, assertive, masculine energy. But here's the key. These forces aren't actually opposites, they're complementary. They need each other to exist like, two sides of the same coin. Think about a day and night, light and dark, even just breathing in and out. It's all this dance between yin and yang. And finding that balance within ourselves is crucial for our health and longevity. It was like that time I tried to build a treehouse with only nails and no hammer. I was all yang, all action, but no balance. Needless to say, that treehouse didn't really turn out as planned. The Tao of Health, Sex, and Longevity stresses that this balance of yin and yang needs to be woven into every aspect of our lives. And we start with our internal energy. The book dives into the concept of essence, energy, and spirit as these three treasures we need to cultivate for a long and healthy life. Essence is like our vital life force, the battery pack we're born with. But it gets depleted as we age and indulge in unhealthy habits. Think late nights, stressful jobs, and yeah, maybe one too many slices of pizza. Energy is how this essence flows through our bodies, keeping us, vibrant and active. And spirit is our consciousness, our awareness, that ability to really connect with the world around us. Now, according to Taoism, these three treasures are all interconnected. If our essence is depleted, our energy stagnates and our spirit dims. It's like trying to run a marathon on an empty stomach. You're not going to get very far. But here's the good news. The book gives us practical guidance on how to replenish our essence, boost our energy, and nourish our spirit. And you know what? It's not as complicated as you might think. Simple things like prioritizing sleep eating, nourishing foods, and practicing mindful breathing can make a huge difference. It's about tuning into our bodies, really listening to those whispers, and giving them what they need to thrive. The book really drives home the importance of living in harmony with nature. It's like we become so detached from the natural world, spending most of our time indoors, glued to our screens. And honestly, it's taking a toll on our health and well-being. Remember that time I decided to completely unplug and spend a whole week in a remote cabin in the woods? No Wi-Fi, no phone, just me, the trees, and a whole lot of fresh air. At first, I was freaking out. I mean, what was I going to do without my hourly social media fix? But then this amazing thing happened. The silence actually became peaceful. The birdsong became like music, and just the simple act of breathing felt like a meditation. It was like my whole system was rebooting, resetting to its natural rhythm. It was pretty eye-opening. And that's exactly what the ancient Taoists were talking about. They knew how important it was to connect with nature, to align ourselves with the rhythms of the seasons and nourish our bodies with those fresh whole foods. And you know what? Science is actually catching up, confirming the huge impact nature has on both our physical and mental well-being. The Tao of Health, Sex, and Longevity reminds us that we're not separate from nature, we're part of it. And when we reconnect with that truth, we tap into this source of energy and vitality that's always been there just waiting for us to remember. But you know what? This is just the tip of the iceberg. We've only scratched the surface of what this book has to offer. In the next part of our deep dive, we'll explore some more practical aspects of Taoist health practices, including diet, exercise, and maybe even a little bit about that sex and longevity thing. Stay tuned. Okay, so we've talked about the Tao, Yin and Yang, and those three treasures, essence, energy, and spirit. But how do we actually put all this into practice? Well, the Tao of Health, Sex, and Longevity really gets down to the nitty-gritty, offering some pretty specific advice on, diet, exercise, and, yep, you guessed it, sex. So let's start with what we put into our bodies, right? The fuel that keeps this whole machine running. According to Taoism, food isn't just about, calories or macros. It's about energy. Each food has its own unique energetic properties. It can either nourish or deplete our essence. The book really emphasizes eating whole, unprocessed foods, especially those that are in season. Think fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds. It's all about getting back to basics, connecting with the natural rhythms of the earth, eating foods that are just bursting with life force energy. And here's something interesting. The book suggests certain foods can actually help boost our essence and promote longevity, like goji berries, for example. They've been used in traditional Chinese medicine for centuries. They're packed with antioxidants and are believed to, enhance vitality. The book also talks about reishi mushrooms. They're known for their immune-boosting properties and are said to have this calming effect on the mind. Now, I'm not saying you need to run out and stock your pantry with, exotic herbs and mushrooms, but it's fascinating to see how these ancient wisdom traditions are now being backed up by modern science. The Tao of Health, Sex, and Longevity also offers some pretty interesting insights into how our emotions can impact our health. We always hear about that mind-body connection, but this book takes it to a whole new level. It suggests that negative emotions like anger, fear, and worry can actually deplete our essence and block the flow of energy in our bodies. It's kind of like that time I got stuck in traffic for 2 hours. I was fuming, honking my horn, basically just radiating negative energy. By the time I got home, I was exhausted both physically and emotionally. It was like I had aged 10 years in those 2 hours. The book really emphasizes the importance of cultivating those positive emotions. Joy, gratitude, and compassion. It's not about denying or suppressing our negative feelings, but rather learning to transform them into something more constructive. It's about finding that inner peace that allows our energy to just flow freely. All right, so we've talked about food and emotions. Now let's move on to something a little more active, exercise. But don't worry, we're not talking about grueling workouts or marathon training. Taoism is all about those gentle flowing movements that cultivate energy and promote longevity. The book introduces practices like Qigong and Tai Chi. They involve slow, deliberate movements, deep breathing, and a focus on cultivating that internal energy, or Qi. These practices are designed to strengthen our connection to the Tao, enhance our vitality, and promote that sense of inner peace. I used to think exercise had to be all about pushing myself to the limit, sweating it out, and, feeling the burn. But after I tried Tai Chi, I realized there's a whole other way to approach movement. It's about listening to your body moving with intention and finding that sweet spot where effortlessness meets strength. And speaking of strength, let's talk about the elephant in the room, sex. Now, this is where the Tao of Health, Sex, and Longevity gets really interesting. The book takes a totally different approach to sexuality than what we're used to in the West. It's not about shame or guilt, but rather about celebrating the power of this life force energy and understanding how to harness it for greater health and vitality. One of the key concepts the book explores is this idea of sexual energy cultivation. It suggests that sexual energy is a powerful form of essence that can be transformed and used to enhance our physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being. It's about understanding the interplay of yin and yang within our own bodies and learning to, cultivate and direct this energy in a way that supports our overall health. Now, before you get any ideas, this isn't about some tantric sex marathon or, trying to achieve multiple orgasms. It's about approaching sex with awareness, intention, and a deep respect for ourselves and our partners. It's about understanding the energetic dynamics that are at play and learning to use this powerful force for good. It's like that time I tried to learn how to play the guitar. I thought I could just pick it up and shred like Jimi Hendrix. But it turns out there's a lot more to it than, just strumming a few chords. It takes practice, patience, and a willingness to learn those subtle nuances of the instrument. In a way, that's how it is with sexual energy cultivation. It's not about forcing anything or, trying to achieve some predetermined outcome. It's about approaching it with curiosity, openness, and a desire to learn and grow.
It's about trusting the wisdom of our bodies and allowing the energy to flow naturally. So we've covered a lot of ground here: diet, exercise, emotions, and even sex. But there's one more key aspect of Taoist health practices that we need to talk about, and that's the importance of cultivating our spiritual connection. So when we talk about spirituality, things can get a little, woo-woo or out there, but in Taoism, it's actually pretty grounded. It's about connecting with something bigger than ourselves, tapping into that universal energy, the Tao, that flows through, everything. And one of the most powerful ways to do this, according to the Tao of Health, Sex, and Longevity, is through meditation. But we're not talking about just sitting there and trying to empty your mind. Taoist meditation is more about cultivating awareness, becoming present in the moment, and connecting with our inner energy. The book talks about all sorts of different meditation practices, but one that really stuck with me is something called inner smile meditation. It's this really beautiful practice where you visualize smiling at your internal organs, sending them like love and gratitude. Might sound a little weird, I know.
But it's incredibly powerful. The first time I tried it, I was definitely a little skeptical. I'm smiling at my liver. What's that going to do? But as I sat there focusing on each organ, I started to feel this warmth, this sense of peace just spreading through my body. It was like I was giving myself this big internal hug. And that's what's so cool about Taoist meditation. It's not about escaping reality. It's about coming home to ourselves, to that deep well of peace and stillness that's always within us. Now, the book also talks about another fascinating aspect of Taoist spirituality, and that's internal alchemy. This might sound like something straight out of Harry Potter, but it's a pretty profound concept. It's basically the idea that we can use our inner energy, our chis, to transform ourselves from the inside out. It's like we all have this incredible potential within us, this raw energy that can be cultivated and refined to achieve, greater health, vitality, and even spiritual enlightenment. It's about becoming the best version of ourselves. And one of the key practices in internal alchemy is breath work. The book talks about how our breath is like this bridge between our physical body and our spiritual essence.
By learning to, control and direct our breath, we can influence the flow of energy within us and promote healing, balance, and transformation. I remember when I first started experimenting with breath work, I was blown away by how much it could shift my state of being. Like just a few minutes of deep conscious breathing could calm my mind, relax my body, and boost my energy levels. It's like I had this secret weapon against stress and anxiety. And it's just one example of how these ancient Taoist practices can have such a profound impact on our modern lives. The Tao of Health, Sex, and Longevity is seriously like this incredible toolbox filled with techniques and insights to help us navigate, the challenges of our fast-paced, often chaotic world. It's about finding that balance, that harmony between our inner and outer worlds, between yin and yang, between effort and ease. It's about remembering that we're not just these physical beings, we're also energetic and spiritual beings. And when we nurture all three aspects of ourselves, we really unlock our true potential for health, happiness, and a long, fulfilling life. So there you have it, a whirlwind tour of the Tao of Health, Sex, and Longevity. This book has really challenged my assumptions, expanded my awareness, and honestly inspired me to live more intentionally. And I hope it's done the same for you. Remember, this isn't about reaching some perfect state of being. It's about the journey, the process of self-discovery, and the constant striving for balance and harmony. It's about embracing the Tao, the flow of life, and all that it has to offer. So go out there, experiment, explore, and discover what works for you. After all, the journey to a longer, healthier, and more joyful life starts with a single step.